Hi, and welcome to this week's episode hosted by Gray and Mark Law of St John's Health and Fitness and Mark Elm of Leeds Beckett University, where we take training theory and science onto the gym floor.
Hey up everybody, welcome back to episode 33 of the Yorkshire Fitness Podcast. All right, Elm, how are we doing?
I'm good, Pat, how are you?
Yeah, we're all good, mate. Cheers.
All good. Afternoon, mate.
Have you been busy?
Always, yeah. All good though, yeah. Just nice sunny day, but raining. Obviously, can't have everything in Yorkshire.
No, you can't, mate. Yeah, it's nice. It's been light though, isn't it? I like it. You've got another lift T-shirt, mate. You've always got a different T-shirt, haven't you, every week?
They all have a lift.
Are you looking for sponsorship?
Yeah.
You need St John's to sponsor you. You need a little SJ.
I've got such a big space to sponsor. You might as well kind of make the most of it. Like available for rent. That's the T-shirt for next week. Available to rent.
That's it. That'll do. Yeah, we'll all get one of them. Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you've been enjoying his latest few episodes of this podcast. So today we are going to talk about fat burning, because mainly it's probably one of the biggest questions. Like when people come here from a gym point of view, because let's go back to the beginning a little bit. We said we'd take things from the gym floor, didn't we, and kind of break it down a little bit, like questions that we get asked, things that we're trying to do on the gym floor, and put the little sciencey twist on it by that's where Elm comes into play. So we
training science on the gym floor. That's it.
That was his little strap line. So I would say majority of people that come to the gym or start going to the gym or start running or whatever, they're probably mainly that one of the big interests is burning fat or reducing the body fat. Like improving body composition. It generally comes down to most people can all shed a little bit of body fat, can't they? There's very few people walking around with 8 or 10% body fat, like as we know. As we covered it a bit with John Eaton, didn't we, when we had his John podcast? So it's probably one of the number one priorities to a lot of people, but it's like quite a complicated system, as in how do I reduce body fat? How do I burn body fat? There's lots of different ways and methods out there. So it's quite a complicated one. So we thought it'd be a good one to cover, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah, that was my simple answer to it. Yeah, yes,
that was a simple answer.
What was your answer? Right?
Yeah,
said.
Yeah, no, but it's right, isn't it? Most people start a gym, an exercise program. Majority, general public, it's usually to lose weight. Which, if you transfer it properly, it's lose fat in it. Do you know what I mean? Like when people talk about losing body weight, they're talking about losing body fat, aren't they? So, and it is an interesting topic, and there's loads of theories out there that people come back. Well, this makes you burn fat. That makes you burn fat. Do you know what I saw on Twitter? Men's Health every time exercises to burn belly fat. Do you know what I mean? And so all these things. So, mate, I know. So listen. So
let's simplify
it. Simplify it for us, Al. Chuck it into
simplify it. So I'm going to simplify it by talking about Newton's laws of thermodynamics. That's obviously going to be a good way to simplify anything. Calories.
That's very true.
We talked about way back when. So if you ingest more calories than you burn, then you will gain fat, because what happens is our bodies are animals. I'm into this pretty much. I feel like I talk about it every episode. So ignore the fact that we have our human frontal cortex part of our brain that can forward plan. Our brain is evolved from an animal that doesn't forward plan, that doesn't think about mortgages or meal time. They just think, am I hungry? Am I not hungry? And food sometimes is available, sometimes isn't available. So we've evolved from a period of time where you might have one meal one day, and it might be 24 hours, 36 hours, 3 days before your next meal. So in that situation, what we've done is evolved to be to be able to store food in terms of body fat to survive until we get the next meal. So that's kind of, from an evolutionary point of view, how we have evolved. Our society and food availability has evolved far faster than that. So we now are programmed to eat food and store food. So if you consume more than you burn, you will store. And the way that we store that is in 3 simple ways. Now, the currency of movement is this molecule called ATP. And that's how we spend our calories, if you like. And there's a very, very small amount of that. And then what we do is we convert other things to kind of replace the ATP that we burn straight away. So we have glycogen, which is what we store in our muscle. And we have a bit of a store of that. And that's kind of your carbohydrate store, from whatever simple terms. And then once we've kind of filled our liver and our muscles with enough glycogen that can store, anything that's surplus to that is stored as fat. So that's effectively our savings account of energy. So we have our current account, which is our glycogen or ATP in the muscle and our liver. And then we have our savings account, for like a money term, for our body fat, which is stored subcutaneously around the skin. And then we have some that get stored around the organs. And that's obviously the worst kind, because that's going to impact on how those organs work. But effectively, the things that we can see is a fat that sits under the skin and belly fat, or wherever each person stores their fat. So going back to kind of why it's important, if I move at any point, I use my ATP up, and then I'm going to replace that by some ways to convert that store of glycogen or fat back into the ATP. And anything that is surplus will automatically get stored as fat. Now, whether that's ingested as fat or ingested as carbohydrate, it does not matter. What you eat, if it's a fuel source, which is carbs or fat, it's a little bit of protein, but we'll ignore that for the time being, because it's not really our main focus for today. So anything that you consume above and beyond what you need will be stored as fat. It does not matter how it was ingested. That's how it's going to get stored. So having a low fat diet or a high fat diet or a high sugar diet or a high carbohydrate is irrelevant if you are ingesting more than you're burning. It will all be stored as fat. In the same way that I move around, I might draw from my glycogen stores, I might draw from my fat stores, depending on how intensely I'm working, but the net balance is the same. So my preferred way is use the ATP, then use the muscle glycogen, and then what the glycogen does is draw energy from my fat stores to replace what's in the muscle glycogen. I'll replace that. Once that's replaced, okay, our fat stores are depleted. But once it's full of glycogen, it's got enough what it can hold, anything that you then consume will go back to being fat stores. So that idea of what I ingest, the food I take in, and how that influences what I burn is a little bit of a myth. So the idea of low fat versus high fat diet is only really relevant in terms of the calories it delivers and how you prefer to burn calories, but the net balance is always going to be the same. Is that simple enough?
Can we
go further?
Yeah, it is a tough one to explain simply, isn't it? The fat burning thing. Can we just go that little bit what Mark brushed on there? Because I know it is something that a lot of people. This is probably one of the most mind-boggling subjects out there, but it's ones that the Instagrammers, the idiots of the world use. Like you say, it's eat this food to melt your belly fat away, or do this exercise to melt your belly fat. It's complete nonsense. Let's just chat a little bit about how you cannot target body fat, a loss of body fat from anywhere on your body. It's impossible. No matter what exercises you do, no matter what food you eat, you are not going to target the fat from an area of your body, can you? It's impossible.
No, there's absolutely been categorically disproven spot reduction of fat is not possible. What typically happens is most people have a pattern of where they deposit and therefore withdraw fat. So each person will have an area of their body naturally deposits fat tissues, and that's probably where the first port of call is to release those fat stores. But you can't decide. If you can't do like tricep dips and all of a sudden expect to have your tricep fat reduced. It might look different temporarily, because if you exercise a particular part of the body, it has what's called transient hypertrophy. It gets bigger because you're using it at that time. It gets filled with muscle. It gets filled with blood, and it looks bigger and better because you've just used it. So people then latch onto that and go, well, that area looks better because I've just trained it, therefore I've got less fat in it. No, you give it half an hour to an hour later, the muscle tone's reduced, the blood flow is reduced, it looks exactly the same as it did before, and it's still got the same amount of fat as it had before. So yeah, the idea of spot reduction. Sorry, Matt.
What if you wrapped cling film around your belly? All right. like full Monty.
Full Monty, full
I
Monty.
mean, come on, surely that works. They did it on full Monty. That's what he was trying to do. But it was going to.
I know.
Yeah, Mars band.
This is the sort of madness in some ways. I know that's an extreme version, but this is what like it's that thing in it. Like targeting these areas. Well, I just want to lose it from here. Like you've just got to lose. You've just got to lose your body fat, mate, in general. Like so.
Right, good. All right, cool.
Yeah.
That one, I just wanted to clear that up. I just wanted to be able to put it out there again because we have to say that a lot. We do have to persistently tell people, no, you cannot. It don't matter. So that's a good point. A lot of people will hopefully listen to that and go, right, okay, brilliant. And I hope the believers.
Me too. But we can't. We haven't
got enough followers. We haven't got enough followers for it to be true.
That's probably true. The other big part of fat burning? What I think people what is probably the exercise. Let's go into the exercise part of it now. We spoke about it a little bit earlier, didn't we? The fat burning more, like the zones here. Should I be working at this intensity? Should I be working that intensity? What's my optimum fat burn and all that? I think we need to chat a little bit about that as well.
Okay. So let's have a bit of theory again. So yes, there are different levels of exercise intensity that have a preferred fuel source. And that's based around how hard you're working. So if you want to work really, really hard, you can only burn carbohydrates. You can't because they're good on how quickly we can process them. But we can't produce as much ATP. Again, that's the currency that our muscle uses. So we can't produce as much ATP for one molecule of carbohydrate for the same molecule as fat. But it's faster. So that's why we can do it really intense. We can burn it up quicker, but not as much of it. So if I was to walk around, and this is where the fat burning zone came in, lower intensity work uses fat, and very high intensity work uses carbohydrate. So that's your muscle glycogen, your liver, and glycogen stores. What happens then is, in terms, let's take HIIT for an example. I think we might have mentioned this in our HIIT session that we did. Well, again, I'll link that in the show notes for those people who are interested in HIIT training. In the work period, you would use carbohydrate. In the recovery period, you would use fat stores. And actually, relative to the same level of intensity, if I was to cycle at 100 watts, an average kind of output of 100 watts on a steady state exercise, and 100 watts in my rest interval, that rest interval will produce more fat burning than the equivalent just pedaling away 100 watts, because it's the paying the debt of the work you've just done. So am I using fat if I'm steady state? Yes. Am I using fat in my rest intervals? Yes. Will that make me less fat? Depends what I eat. It always depends what you eat, because I go back to what I said at the beginning. It's that calorie balance that you are aiming for. You will draw on your fat stores, depending on how much you deplete those energy stores, depending on how much leaner you'll get, and then depends how much fat you then take in, or how many calories you take in and then store as fat, as to whether your net body composition, your net fat balance goes up or down. So what you do in that 30-minute spin class, HIIT class, workout, whatever it is you do, will depend on the fuel that you're using, but it won't necessarily have a massive impact on your body composition. It won't. Now, what I would say is things like if I was to do a hypertrophy, like a muscle building program, and I was to walk around that's 2 kilos heavier of pure muscle, that muscle is burning more fat more of the time because there's more of it that burns. So fat itself doesn't burn any calories, but muscle needs calories to stay as muscle. So I will burn more fat just by being 2 kilos heavier in muscle. So a 100 kilo person who is 15% body fat will burn more calories walking around than somebody who is 25% body fat, even though they weigh exactly the same, because the metabolic cost of that muscle. So it gets a little bit complex, but I would just basically say, if you are trying to burn fat, the exercise is probably not the solution. It's what you put on your plate or what you do in the kitchen. Again, we've said that I don't know how many times now. But in terms of fat burning, from an exercise management, body composition point of view, it's kind of futile. It's only as good as the kind of the net balance. Now, from a performance point of view, it's completely different. It has a massive impact on how you choose to exercise and what you're trying to get out of it. So we talked about the last 2 weeks, we had a health issue and then breathing for performance issue. If I want to run really, really fast, I'm going to have to dip into my carbohydrate stores. But if I'm going to like a zone 2 steady state run, just nice and I can have a conversation kind of intensity, I'll use fat stores. So you'd use the fuel source that's appropriate for how hard you want to work. And we can get into ideas of like things like becoming fat adapted and carb adapted and metabolic flexibility. And those are all kind of performance-based issues. But for the body composition issues, it doesn't really make a blind bit of difference. It's the calories in, calories out that makes the most important difference.
Yeah. You can't out-train a bad diet again, Mark, can you?
No.
You can't out-train it, and when we've had this again before. People monitor; they're only happy with the training session that they've done if they've burned X amount of calories. When like it's the bigger picture in it that they should be looking at. Like I mean, you try and explain it on there loads of times. Like how many calories you burn in an hour. People burn 600 calories in an hour. They've worked hard, haven't they? 600 calories. Yeah. God. You can put that on easy enough, can't you?
It's like a very small diet meal, that, isn't it? If you just like
restaurants
now put calories on their meals, like there's a 500 calorie option. You look at it, it's like three lettuce leaves and a kind of a salad, and it's like, but I get that for that work I've just done. Just doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, but that's what people get hung up on still, don't they? We're talking about fat loss and we're on about why and how you burn fat, but it does come down to that again, doesn't it? With like how you can't base it on what you train. If you're training solely to lose weight, you're gonna find it tough, aren't you? And you're probably gonna get a bit dejected by it all, aren't you?
Yeah. So a lot of common like trends that have emerged over the last, I've said about 10 years or so, things like fasted exercise, the keto diet, becoming fat adapted, all these things have emerged. And there are some long-term health implications for these that are quite helpful. So if you are on the keto diet, what you are doing is having very low carbohydrate and probably in a calorie restriction. It's the calorie restriction part that means you're going to lose weight, not the fact that it's high fat and low carbs. Yeah. But what those people think to do, I don't know if anybody's tried to do like fasted exercise. It makes the exercise so much harder.
Yeah, it does.
It makes the exercise so much harder. I mean, if you go for like a steady state, just like an easy jog, it's not too bad. But if you're trying to go up the gears, intensity and hard work, it becomes really, really hard. If you've got anybody, I don't know if you've got any clients on like keto diets and stuff like that, they try and do like HIIT classes. They just tank. They just haven't got those upper level gears to be able to go into it. They just struggle because they need carbohydrate to push hard. So if you're somebody that wants to lose weight and likes your exercise, those aren't solutions that marry up together. You kind of have to have carbohydrates around your exercise to be able to do it properly. Otherwise, you feel like you're just slugging, you're going through treacle to try and keep up with everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. I can't do it. I can do, if it's first thing on a morning and maybe a run, like you say, a run's all right. Even when we've gone and done hill sprints, I'm all right without my breakfast then. Like that's fasting it. But if it gets to like middle of the day and we're doing our training and I'm hungry, even if I'm just hungry, we've had this conversation before, even if I'm just hungry and I'm not fasted as such, I've had my breakfast and I'm not fasted, I just feel like I've got nothing.
Are you hungry or hangry?
Well, both. Yeah, hungry, mate. Yeah,
it might be mental, but I genuinely feel exactly how you've just described it. I feel like I'm low on energy, low, like I've got no reserve tank. I just feel like I haven't got that in to kick on to the next level to make it a tough session.
But you do feel like you should have. You think, well, I've eaten enough over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, you're not starving.
But it don't work right. But your blood sugar levels probably are low, aren't they?
I mean, there are populations out there who exercise who would benefit from this high fat, not low calorie diet. Again, I'm not into low calories. About being fat adapted is like the ultra endurance runners. People who run crazy long distances. They need that high energy output that you get from fat burning. Because they're running such big distances, they don't have those kind of high intensity outputs. They're not running like a sprint, or they're not trying to run fast up a hill. They're just trying to kind of just chug away constantly. So they probably do benefit from being fat adapted and having this kind of being in the fat burning zone permanently. They don't need that carbohydrate overdrive gear to go into. But most people do. Like we need, we call it like metabolic flexibility, the ability to use the right fuel source at the right time, efficiently and effectively. And a lot of people will go into really like severe calorie restrictions to lose the body composition, and it affects just the ability to, first of all, do daily life, and then definitely affects the ability to exercise. And again, if you're exercising for physical appearance purposes, for body composition purposes, you're probably going to fail. There are other health benefits that come with it, and don't get me wrong, but you aren't going to look the way you're going to look or have the body fat percentage you want if exercise is the only way you're doing it. And we're not the only ones saying that. I mean, we all listened to the Tim Spector podcast the other day. He's far smarter than I am, and probably kind of this building put together, and he's very clear, like exercise and fat loss does not work.
Yeah, no, he explains it really well, doesn't he? Yeah, no,
exercise for health does work.
Yeah.
Hey, there's many other things about exercise that are positive, but just that one bit about kind of getting the waistline down, just do it a different way.
Yeah.
but the exercise can be good. It's that balance in it. It's getting that balance right. If yes, you are eating really well, then the exercising part, like you said, the steady. If you're going out for a nice jog, you know in your head it's like, right, I know I will be burning some fat here. Then it's going away and not eating all the crap to replace it.
Or you're training to build muscle.
Or you train, yeah,
it's a bit.
And just in the complexity of like targeting fat burning and exercise, it's almost impossible to do accurately, because what you eat and when you eat it has an impact on what fuel you burn during the exercise. So if I say, right, go and do some zone 2 cardio now, and you just have some carbohydrate within the past hour, you will preferentially burn that carbohydrate first rather than the carbs, rather than the fat, sorry. So even just going from a really basic level of saying, well, this is zone 2, therefore it's fat burning, even that becomes complicated, because your meal timings and meal content influence your use of carbohydrate versus fat. So to have an exercise strategy which is specifically for fat burning is really, it's doomed to fail. It's not going to kind of pan out, and ultimately you'll never know. Like unless you kind of walk on with gas analysis on your face, the kind of like the air content mixture, you're not going to know if you're burning fat or not burning fat. And the only way you'll know is by kind of measuring your body fat percentage, and even then that's hard enough to do accurately. So what really matters is basically, I think what most people say is 2 things: the waistline measurement, or 3 actually. The waistline measurement, how they look in the mirror, and then maybe what they say on the scales, and the scales may or may not influence people. And that is what you put in your plate, and how big your plate is, and how many plates of it you have.
Yeah. Another question. This is something it was a few years ago that I learned it, but I can remember struggling getting my head around it a little bit about, and I think it's why the idea, it was the initial idea behind the fat burning podcast, was how a lot of people don't know how you actually burn fat, or how does your body actually get rid of the fat. I've been asking nearly everybody who I've trained. I've only had one lad, Andy, nailed it. He just told me, we're like, oh God, nice one, yeah. But nobody else knows. Like, it's just a question that you think, well, how did you? Where does it go? Where does the fat actually go? It don't just melt away. It don't leak out of your skin, does it?
Well, if you listen to Instagram, this fat melting thing that going like a light underneath your gut going, oh, that's melting. No.
So, do you want to explain the process a little bit? So basically, we breathe it out, don't we?
A bus I can just see coming my way.
Yeah. So do you want to explain that process? Simplify it a little bit for people.
Yeah, I shall do my best as a non-physiologist, as a biomechanist trying to explain physiology. So again, we'll go back to our body releases hormones and chemicals that tell us what is happening within our muscles. We measure the kind of blood composition, and that goes to the brain. That kind of sends signals to tell the body what to do. So we have this ATP store in our muscle, and it's kind of within a second it's gone, and we have to then replenish that. That kind of replenishment process keeps the muscle moving. We'll then tell the muscle is told to release energy into these little parts of our muscle cells called mitochondria. There we go. We came up. We said if we're going to mention it or not, and these are kind of like energy factories that are in our muscle. Okay, and that will pull in fuel sources to convert those fuel sources into more ATP. What happens then is we send the chemical signals from the brain. We realize that this is the muscle glycogen is depleting. We send hormones into the bloodstream. That then triggers the release of what we call triglycerides or lipids, fatty acids. They get released from our fat cells. Again, they're stored all over the body. And again, we don't just kind of drop off a spot. It's all this signal gets to every single fat cell. That gets released. The muscle, the working muscle, absorbs those triglycerides, those fatty acids, and tops up those stores. The things that it doesn't need just keeps in the blood cells, and if it keeps in the blood cells, they'll get reabsorbed back into the adipose tissue again, back into the fat cells. Gets stored, gets used. More gets reabsorbed. If it doesn't get used, it continues in the bloodstream and goes back into the adipose tissue, the under the skin stuff, or the around the organ stuff. So that's about as simple as I can make it. And that's why we get the build atherosclerosis, or the buildup of plaque in our arteries. The circulating triglycerides basically stick to artery walls. That's when we start to lead into heart attacks, strokes, those kinds of things, because that kind of fatty tissue gets clogged in the arteries. That causes a blockage, and that then stops the heart working or stops the brain working. So that's kind of how it works, but only
is that your simplified version?
I was just going. I'm thinking, how can we simplify that a little bit more? It's very hard to do. It's very difficult. Yeah. I know it is.
Where did I lose everybody? Tell me, please.
It is a tough one to simplify for people.
I think maybe one of the things, like when like our oxygen's used for it, and then we breathe it back out, don't we? And the whole thing. But anyhow.
The simplest way I can try to kind of make sure that you spend your current account, you then go to your savings account to pull it out. Okay. Yeah. Imagine that you've got a warning on your bank account that says as soon as your bank account gets to like less than 50 quid, it automatically draws down 100 quid from your savings.
Yeah.
So your current account is your glycogen, your muscle carbohydrate, and then your savings are your fat tissue. Once that muscle glycogen gets to a certain level and is dropping low, there's an automatic signal that sends out to your savings account, which is your fat tissue, to release more fat into the blood that then can get absorbed into the muscle, and that can be used to sustain exercise.
Which is why you need to eat less if you want to lose fat.
Yeah.
And then you start using your savings.
Yeah.
Stop topping your current account up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, awesome. That's a great. I think that's a good description of it. Great.
Let's leave it there before I make it overly complicated again.
Fat burning in half an hour. Yeah. Boom, done.
Yeah.
Simple.
I'll lie down in a darkened room now.
Yeah. We always say, don't we? Any questions? If you want any more advice on fat burning or any other ways or blah blah blah, give us a buzz. Let us know. Drop us a message.
Yeah. Any more blah 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 is always welcome.
Yeah, of course. I didn't know what else to say apart from fat burning. So that's it. Another one done.
Next week we'll talk about whatnot, and the week after that'll be you know what.
Let's do it. The could be most popular ones ever.
I think all we talk about is blah blah blah.
Yeah, it is. Right, thanks for simplifying fat burn, Elm.
No problem. Also,
I like your current account savings account.
That's a good one.
There you go. Yeah, you can use that one. So if you like it, please remember to subscribe, leave us a rating, and tell lots of people about it, because not enough people know about it. Tell the world. Everyone needs to know about it. We've had no listeners in Africa yet. We've had every continent. We've not got anybody in Africa yet. So what we need to do is a listener who knows somebody in Africa, send it to them.
Yeah.
Tell them to listen to it, and then we've got all the continents covered.
Global.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sound
class. Yeah, we'll do that. Nice one. All right, Al.
Right. Cheers, boys. See you in a bit.
See you later, everybody.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like the episode, we'd like you to share with us that on YouTube, Instagram and Twitter. You can listen again on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a rating and a review, and any comments would be more than appreciated. And hopefully you'll tune back next time for our next episode.